Good afternoon and welcome to our final in the series, Ask the Doctor. We have enjoyed having you all with us over the past month, and today is the final in the episode. We are hoping that you will continue to ask your questions in the chat, but we do have quite a few advanced questions to answer for you. My name's Jackie, and I'm a member of the Health and Lifestyle team here in Croydon. And today we have Dr. Wesley Warren with us, and we hope that you will enjoy the responses that he has for your questions. Before we start, we will open with a word of prayer. Father in heaven, we are so grateful that you continue to bless us. And you've brought us here throughout this 4 weeks of Ask the Doctor. We've had many questions answered, and today is the final in the series. So we thank you for the questions that have been answered, for the information that has been shared. We thank you for the amazing bodies that you've created for us so that we can keep them healthy and commune with you as we should. Thank you so much for always thinking ahead of time and giving us what we need. Bless us now, we pray in the precious name of Jesus. Amen. Dr. Warren, over to you.
Good evening, everyone, and all those who are watching. It took me a while to get here. Just to say, so I'm sort of calming down nicely as I see these beautiful smiling faces, the few that are here, that is. I know that you guys who are watching are smiling at me as well, so that will sort of settle me down. Now, I understand that this is the final, as has just been said by Jackie, in the series of your health programs, the 8 Laws of Health. And I'm sure that you've gleaned something from what you've been hearing over the last few weeks. I know my sort of trusted colleague, Dr. Chidi, has been involved within this series as well. Now, myself, just a little bit about myself, so you can get some sort of familiarity who's talking to you. Some of it I'm going to present it as well in this trust in God and our attitude. I grew up in Tottenham and attended a Tottenham church from a little boy. And I got into medicine quite later on in life, very mature student. And my interest has always been lifestyle medicine, natural therapy. That's my sort of forte. And I give God thanks that I've been able to instruct and give advice and look after individuals in that perspective as well. I'm currently working in general practice, well, sort of, but let me explain myself. I'm sort of in general practice, but out of hours at present, out of program at present, and so I'm working in a psychiatric ward in North London. And so I'm looking after sort of the physical side of the patients on the psychiatric ward. This is quite enjoyable. But today I'm going to spend 10 minutes talking about that last aspect. Well, it's not really last, it's actually center of the 8 Laws of Health. And it's trusting God and our attitude. The key thing with, I would say, the trusting God and our attitude is that it's something that we don't really sort of hear much about in terms of the 8 Laws of Health. It's sort of there, but we do talk a lot about the others. So hopefully we'll glean something from this. But I think, in essence, I do believe that if I make it as practical as possible, so you can understand what it really means to be trusting God and our attitude, hopefully we'll be able to get something from what I'm going to share with you. So, unfortunately, because I got here quite late because of the travel time, I'm unable to share my sort of PowerPoint with yourselves. So you've got I think I'm fairly good looking. So you've got my voice and my face to sort of like listen to. And hopefully through the power of the Spirit, of the Holy Spirit working with me, so that you can get some sort of inspiration from what is being said as well. So let's get into this 10-minute aspect of trusting God in our attitude. So pray. This is the statement. Pray, then let it go. Don't try and manipulate or force the outcome. Just trust God to open the right doors at the right time. So that is something, isn't it? And it's very hard to do when we think about it, is to pray and just let God do his will with our prayer. Because sometimes when we're not getting an answer, we want to force the issue. We want to sort of like trying to deal with it ourselves. And we've got a good example within scriptures with Abraham and Sarah. They had a promise, but they couldn't wait, and they sort of tried to help God out. And so he had a child through his, what do you call it? Sarah's maid, through his maid. Okay, so that's a statement, but the Bible says something here which is, I would say, is a great statement. It says, but if you remain in me, and this is in John chapter 15, verse 7, but if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want and it will be granted. Now that's amazing, isn't it? So we can ask anything we want if Jesus is within us and we remain in Jesus. Now, even since that's quite a powerful statement. And then in one sense, well, we can't take it out of context. Because some people will say, well, because I'm a believer, that would mean say, well, I just need to pray and I have a nice Mercedes. I just need to wait, God will give me the Mercedes. But in context, this is saying as children of God, when we remain in Jesus and Jesus remain in us, is that we will ask things that will obviously propel the kingdom of Jesus Christ. So we will ask for things that will give us the tools to enable us to function well to win souls for Jesus Christ. That's what that statement sort of really means. Okay. So now I'm going to go into this sort of the practical side in terms of through my own life, so that we can really understand what it means to trust God in our attitude. So we know in one sense of our attitude should really be, let's let God have his will, okay? So that's one of our attitudes, so just try and be patient with God, okay? So because I haven't got the pictures, I'm going to need to sort of give some sort of pictorial picture now. My mum was traveling to England for the first time, I think it's the late 50s, and my dad, who obviously they hadn't met, saw her at the airport. And he was traveling to England as well. So when he looked at her, he was quite impressed and said, what a beautiful lady. And he started to sweet talk her. And then 6 months later, they were married. So they didn't waste time in those days. They got married quite quickly. Okay, so they seemed to know what they want and just went for it. Okay. So the sad thing, though, is that her first child was born stillbirth. So that was quite traumatic for her. And what made it worse is that a second child was also born stillbirth. So that was really extremely emotionally challenging for her. So when she then had me, or I was, conceived with myself in her tummy, the doctor suggested to her that she rest. So she decided to return to Antigua, just herself, Dad was still here, and to hopefully have me safely in Antigua. So Dad left here. He was obviously quite anxious. So I only came to this much later in life, where he prayed that he will have a son or a child that will serve in medical missionary, and he will make all the sacrifices he can so that child can serve him in that specific manner. So I then was born, obviously, in Antigua. And 4 years later, she decided to make her way back to England. So I met my dad for the first time. I was sleeping, my head was sleeping on my mum's lap, and I just felt someone tap me. And as he tapped me, I got up. Well, once I got up, I looked up, and I saw this man with the bags, the suitcases. And I said to my mum, "Who's that man?" So she said, "It's your daddy." "Your daddy." That's how she put it. "It's your daddy." So I got to know him from then on, and we lived in South Tottenham, and then we were one of the first residents in Broadwater Farm Estate. I'm not sure if because you guys live in South London, so North London may be a bit alien to you, but, but it was quite notoriously known on the news, sadly, in the 1980s. So we were one of the first residents in Broadwater Farm, and I felt it was I loved my youth. It was a fantastic community with a great community spirit. And I went to school, primary school, in Broadwater Farm. But the last 2 years, the last 2 years of my primary education, my dad decided that he wanted me to be educated in one of our schools. So this school was Highland House in Walthamstow at the time. It's moved now to John Loughborough. So my last 2 years, I think that decision paved the way and gave me the foundation educationally for the rest of my life. Those 2 years I would say, was the most important 2 years of my life. And I have a great picture to show you. Unfortunately, it was a picture of all of us in the school at that specific time with Mr. Wright. Mr. Wright was the headmaster of the school, and I was really fond of him. I think he kind of liked me as well. And we used to have always conversations about cricket. So in 1976 was the tour of the West Indies as well. And we used to have great conversations about who's going to win and so forth. And there was a statement, I must get off topic. I was going to talk about Tony Gregg and his statement, but I must get off topic. It's just that I got so excited when I used to talk to Mr. Wright about cricket. But anyway, he said to me one time, "Wesley," because I think we used to play schools as well, he thought that I may become famous in sport. So he said, "Wesley, if you become famous, I'm going to name this school after you." And that stuck in my memory. But I think when I look back, I think it's because of my sporting abilities. And then the next 2 years of my education was secondary school, and that was in Stanborough Park in Garston. So Dad bought a house, then it became difficult in terms to finance my school fees and also with this new mortgage. So I went to a local comprehensive in Haringey, and I was in my element. I loved it. I did basketball, I was a basketball captain, I was cricket, I was even the selector of the Haringey cricket team. So my games teacher said, "Wesley, pick the Haringey team for me." I did athletics, so I ran for Haringey. What else is it? Football. I also did football. And as I said, in that time, five-a-side, you all know Pastor Brooks? England Brooks, yeah. So we all attended the Holcombe Road Church, and as a five-a-side team, we won the five-a-side championship, back in then. So that's how much I was into sport. So I left school with hardly any qualifications. Well, if there was anything to rub in terms of qualifications about me, it wasn't there. But it didn't bother me. I just enjoyed life. I enjoyed sport. And that's what mattered to me, was to get up in the morning and enjoy life, enjoy sport. It was so bad that, this was so bad because just the other day I met someone I used to go to church with in Tottenham, and she said, "Oh, it's great that you got into medicine, Wesley. I told my mum that you got into medicine." And she said, "Him? All that boy wanted to do was play ball. I can't believe it." So that's how bad things were then. So my dad's prayer, in essence, when I look back, because he only told me this late, obviously wasn't coming to any sort of fruition. But God works away. It's amazing how God works. And if all of us can look in our lives, we can see how God has a path for all of us. And although I may be ignorant then, in terms of my ideas of life, God was still setting a path for me. So I got a job in what's called as an ODP. But before then, let me just go back. I was baptized when I was 13, and that was something else. It sort of gave me more of a sort of spiritual spiritual aspect of my life, I should so to speak. I started thinking more of spiritual things. So I started reading my Bible more, and I started to read, even say, some books on spirit prophecy, messages to young people, and so forth. And when I was about 16 and 17, God spoke to me quite vividly, and that was amazing. That was something that gave me an experience as I went on in life. I won't talk about that now because we sort of need to move on a little bit from here, but maybe another time. So, as I said, I was highly involved in cricket, and this was the crux of I think this was probably the turning point in terms of God's leading and how my dad was hopefully trusting that his prayer would come to fruition. So it was around 1984, West Indies came back again, and they won 5-0 in the series in 1984. So they started scouting for local talent in Tottenham. There's this man named Fred Titmus. I don't know if some of you may have heard the name Fred Titmus. He used to play for England. He was a spinner. I only knew that after asking questions. So they came, and I was indoors, playing some indoors cricket, and himself and another gentleman called me and said, "We want you to join a county team, and we'll pay you £100 a week. And then as you progress in the county team, the skies could be your limit. It could be international cricket." So what do you think I said to them as I stood there? I was a 17-year-old young man. This seemed quite a great prospect as well. And I looked at them, and I said, no. So I think the way they looked, I was more sort of disappointed for the way they looked than for the way I felt. It's as if their mouth dropped, and they said, "Why?" So I said, "Well, I go to church on Saturdays, and if I join a county, it's going to have an impact on my church life." So they accepted that, and they went their way. Anyway, so let me just speed up a bit. So I became what we call an ODA, Operating Department Assistant, working in the operating theatre. And most of that time was at the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery in Hollybourne, central London. I became a theatre manager there before I went into medicine. And I went into medicine, and as I came out of medicine, the key thing I wanted to do was lifestyle medicine. But it didn't work out. Somehow, miraculously, I was doing medical work in a hospital. And that was a miracle in itself. But as I said, because this takes some explanation, I'm going quickly. So we're here to serve, and I can see how God has led me to become a doctor, to serve as a medical missionary. And so my dad's prayer was answered, and it's a miracle in how have been. Now, what I've seen, what reinforces me in terms of how we must trust God for the 8 laws of health. I'll give you one example. There's a lady who spoke to me just last week, a friend of mine, a cousin of mine, actually called and said, "Urgent, can you speak to me?" So I called him and he said, "Can I speak to his PA, who is unwell at this time, and she's bleeding quite a lot?" So I said, "Okay, no problem." So I was on the phone with her last Sunday, and I said, "Look, she's had this problem for a couple of years, and she's tried everything. She says she doesn't want any more. There's a medication called tranexamic acid. There's another medication called a progesterone. It helps to stop the bleeding. She said she doesn't want any more of that." So I said, "Don't worry, we can fix that quite easily." She said, "What should I do?" Now, can I ask the audience some questions? No? Okay. What I said to her, just take a lemon, fresh lemon, 3 times a day, and that will fix the problem. She called me yesterday and said, "Oh, doctor, I can't believe it." Because I told her, give it 4 weeks and call me back and we'll talk about further. Only less than 7 days later, she said, "The problem is resolving. Life It's as if my life force was draining from me, but now I feel so much better. Is there anything else? So I'm going to follow her up again. And what I'm trying to say here is trusting in God's 8 laws of health must be, as we're walking in God's purpose, because I see that now I'm walking in God's purpose, his laws of health is there for us to be confident, to trust that when we give advice, it will resolve in a positive outcome. I'm not saying that all the time it will do, because there are certain circumstances, but majority of the times it will resolve in a positive outcome. So we must serve God in terms of what he's called us to do. So I'm going to finish off here, because I think I've gone over the 10 minutes. And the trusting God, I had a lovely picture of the 8 laws of health, with the trusting God being in the center focus of all the other 8 laws of health. Thank you for listening for this aspect of the trusting God and our attitude. Right, I think we've got some questions now.
Yes, Doctor. This one is a lifestyle question for you, and it comes in 2 parts. First part, what is good food for the memory? And the second part is, what else can one do to help early dementia? Better still, how can you avoid it altogether with lifestyle changes?
Okay. Now, I was speaking to... now, in general practice, when you are training in general practice, you have what you call a supervisor. And the great thing about the person who was my supervisor was that he was into how would I put it? A lot of nutrition and so forth to a certain extent. Okay. So we were talking about dementia one afternoon, both of us. And he said to me, Wesley, what do you think is one of the key things to help with dementia? So I said, fasting. He said, oh yeah, great, correct. So now, but how do we, and let's go back to the initial part of the question in terms of early dementia. How do you avoid early dementia?
The first part of the question was, what is good food for the memory? And
okay. All right, so now, when we say good food for the memory, when it's plant-based, that is better in itself, because there's less what we call bad oils within a plant-based diet. When it's also filled with roughage, so we have, instead of sort of devitalized foods, like white flour products, white rice and so forth, then we're going to get, if it's not that kind of food, and we're getting more of, obviously, a complete, balanced kind of diet, we have more chance of not developing or reducing the risk of developing dementia. Now, early dementia is seen as diagnosed before 65 years old. 65 years and on is sort of typical of the age of development of dementia. Now, if we bring in the 8 laws of health, nutrition plays a major part in that. So foods that contain what we call the B vitamins, and B vitamins are helpful in terms of our neurological function. So we've got B12, and we've got B3, B1 thiamine. All these specific B complexes do help in our neurological makeup. So foods that contain B vitamins are things like brown rice, and also we call the pulses as well. So if we're eating meals that constitute what we call whole food, so brown rice and so forth, that will help or be more helpful in terms of reducing the risk of dementia. But there are things that we do that increases the risk, or don't do. Okay, so if we just bring in everything in here, so let's look at water. If we are dehydrated and we don't drink enough water, well, you find that you feel quite tired and you can't function mentally as you should do. So water plays a major part in terms of our thinking and our thoughts and our vitality. Temperance, when I mentioned about the fasting and not eating or overeating, helps again in terms of our thinking, our thoughts, and the types of food, as we just mentioned. So temperance is a key thing. Now, I want to bring in something. I don't want to bring it in now, but mostly, possibly at the end, I'm going to come back on the temperance and the fasting as well. So fresh air as well, obviously, and exercise. These two things with fresh air and exercise are so important. So walking is the best form of exercise. Now, in the bottom of our legs is some big valves. And when we walk, we are pumping the lymphatic tissue, or lymph out and up and out. So all these toxins that we do build up are dissipated, even if they would walking. So walking is a fantastic exercise that will help reduce our possibility, the risk of dementia. So these are sort of, I would say, the key things, also with rest, having a good quality rest time. But unfortunately, there are more things that we do that brings on or increases the risk of dementia. Okay, so I'm going to round up on this specific. I hope that I've answered that question relatively okay. So quality of the foods, we want your B complexes, and that you're getting that brown rice and the beans, and also exercise and so forth. And there's things that we should avoid doing, bad oils, fried food and so forth, that will help to reduce the risk. Okay, so we've got the next question.
Okay, next question is a lifestyle one. Eating little and often is the advice given to diabetics. However, I am told that it is best for the gut to leave 4 to 5 hours between meals. Do we really need all this time to digest meals?
Okay, so there was once a directive, and it depends what type of diabetes that person is talking about. I suspect that we're looking at diabetes type 2, okay? Now, because there is a difference there in terms of how we manage the type 1 and type 2. So in type 1 diabetes, just as a recap, the pancreas, which sends out insulin, is unable to do so because the B cells that sends out the insulin to our body to enable the sugar in our blood to go into the body cells is not being produced in type 1. Okay, and that's usually a development from a very young age, okay, type 1. So they need insulin to enable body function, okay, to enable glucose to be taken up into our body's stores and our body cells. If it's type 2, that's usually because there's a problem with the glucose going into the cells. So the pancreas is producing the insulin, but the insulin helps as like a key to open the door of the cells for the sugar to go in. So what was said before was that if we eat frequently and often, then that will enable your blood sugar levels not to drop or to go too high. But again, it's the quality of the food. So every individual had a dietitian to enable that to be quite effective. But if you've got 4 hours in between, they had a study recently, of recent times in Israel, to say no, it should be according to the body's function, how we eat, which was 4 to 5 hours. So what happens when we have a meal, so a meal that's composed of the fats, the proteins, and the carbohydrates, so a good quality meal, a good meal, is that it takes about 4-5 hours to digest out of the stomach. Now then what happens, obviously, then is your insulin dissipates, that goes down. And then what comes in is what we call something called glucagon. So your pancreas kicks in the glucagon. So you get this cycle of insulin when we eat, then the fasting state where the food goes, and then the glucagon. The glucagon helps to keep our body in a steady state of glucose, so it'll then take the stores of sugar that's stored in the liver, and that will help us keep our function. So the key study of recent times is saying that really we should have that cycle of insulin and then glucagon, so that our body is maintaining that perfect cycle of our hormonal system. And so that's the reason. So I'm not sure if that helps, but it's usually because of recent research that has changed, that really sort of improves the health of a diabetic. And again, diabetes has been seen that it can be reversed through also good nutrition and good lifestyle changes, especially type 2, that is, can be reversed. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. The next question in relation to stress. Can stress be inherited? And if so, how? How can this be changed or reversed?
Okay. Now, stress is, there are specific types of health issues that can be passed down or inherited. But in one sense, I would say, obviously, if you've got parents who are stressed for one reason or the other, maybe you may be precipitated to stress as well. That's a possibility. In terms of saying, yes, stress is inherited because your mum had it, your dad had it, so you're going to have it, not necessarily, because it's really, stress is a reaction of how we sort of cope with a specific situation. So, and how we sort of interpret what is stress as well. So if you were not sleeping at night and we're anxious, that could be seen as a stress reaction to a specific stressor. So having an impact, sort of life circumstances having an impact on us and how we are sort of coping with that specific issue and how we then sort of respond with it then sort of has an impact on our health. So what's happening in stress? So in stress, our adrenaline, obviously, which is a hormone within us, is a bit more raised. And if it's not controlled, if it's going on for some time, there's another hormone called cortisol. And that can be another problem in terms of raising our blood sugar levels. So our blood pressure can be raised and our blood sugar levels can be raised with stress. Okay. So the key thing in terms of the question there, in terms of is stress inherited? It's normally how we cope with the specific issue. And again, recognizing as well that we're in a stressful state. Because sometimes we may be in a stressful state and not recognizing it as well. Okay.
What is hydrotherapy, and what, if any, are the benefits to one's health?
Psychotherapy?
Hydrotherapy.
Okay. Now, hydrotherapy was a specific therapy that was used supposedly for many a century. It was, one time I would say, the go-to therapy. And if we look at in scriptures, even say Jesus himself spoke to a blind man, blind Bartimaeus, go wash in the pool of Siloam. And also Naaman, he went to Jordan, and dipped 3 times. So water seems to be an aspect of cleansing or healing. Now, as we go through time, the Romans used water as baths as well, as a form of social and also healing as well. Now, it came into, I would say, a science or a type of therapy through John Kellogg's. He actually sort of wrote papers on water therapy and how it heals the body. Now, I practice myself colonic hydrotherapy, and the good thing about colonic hydrotherapy is that it really helps in terms of a cleansing or if you want to sort of like detox. So how that works perfectly is that if you are said, well, I want to do a cleansing of my system, then you usually would go through a fasting state. And when you go through a fasting state, your gut isn't working as effectively, or it comes to a sort of stop. And if it stops, then you're going to get hard food matter clinging to your intestines. So when that happens, you really want to get rid of that, because if you've got food in your intestines sticking to it, you can get what are called toxins building up, and that goes into your bloodstream. So a good way to clear that is what we call colonic hydrotherapy. So I'm not sure if anyone's probably had that, or if people may be aware of colonic hydrotherapy. That is where some water is pumped in through the rectum, and stomach massage is then initiated, and then all that waste matter is cleared.
Okay, next question. What is a peptic ulcer, and how can it be cured, reversed, or prevented? In terms of this question, the person is also interested in traditional. What are the traditional treatments as well as natural treatments?
Okay. So peptic ulcer is the symptoms of peptic ulcer is stomach pain, when you get gut pain. Okay, and it's usually the upper gut. When they say peptic ulcer, it's dealing with the stomach itself. Now you can get this ulceration in sort of several parts of your stomach. So you can get it in the stomach body itself, or you can get it in what you call this first part of the small intestine called the duodenum. And also you can get what we call acid reflux. That's acid going back into your esophagus. Now, if it's diagnosed with peptic ulcer, now, I'll tell you what, let's break it down in terms of a patient coming to me with stomach pain. So there are certain questions we need to ask in terms of, are there any red flags? So the red flags, if someone comes with stomach pain, are they losing weight? Okay. Are they vomiting? Are they finding difficulty to swallow? Or sort of getting where the food is coming back? Are they having blood in the stools? So once that's cleared, and they're under 55, we then can prescribe what we call a PPI, which is an acid suppressant. So what we try to do in terms of this acid suppressant is that if there's not much acid in the stomach, then that will help heal that specific ulceration. So we can get ulcerations from several causes. So sometimes medications could cause it, sometimes stress can cause it as well. So it's what's causing the issue. So we really need to look at what is causing this specific issue, health issue. So in general practice, we will give the patient 4 weeks worth of antacid. And after 4 weeks, if that helps to clear, they can continue up to sort of 12 months, then they can stop. Now, to try to help in terms of natural therapy, the good thing with the 8 laws of health, with peptic ulceration, once we've making sure that the red flags aren't there, there's two therapies, 2 forms of things you can do. One where you can go in a fast for like 2 to 3 days, and that has benefited some people where they just had water for 2 to 3 days, and that seemed to resolve the issue. So fasting helps in terms of the healing process as well. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is obviously to look at what is causing it, obviously. So to work through a health professional to find out what is the cause and then obviously reducing or taking away that specific precipitant. So find out what the cause is, and another way, once you find out the cause, another good effective way is sort of this sort of 2 to 3 days of fasting.
Okay, this question is in relation to the gut. What is all the hype about the gut? Why are there now so many doctors and researchers interested in what goes on in there?
Yeah. Okay, so I've watched the TED presentation in terms of the gut, and it's very, very much quite interesting nowadays as well, in terms of the gut is being linked to how we think and feel as well. And likewise, the way we think and feel has an issue with the gut. So the hype is, and the research is that if our gut is troubled in any sort of way, it's going to affect us, or it can affect us mentally as well, or emotionally. So if we can fix a gut issue or a gut problem, then we're fixing the whole person. So it's almost called the second brain, the gut itself. And we are, with the research that's taking place, that if we are instituting good health, good diet, a good lifestyle, that helps in sort of good gut health, that helps the way we think and feel as well. So that's the reason why it's hyped, that there's now seen a real connection between good gut health and the way we think and feel. So even so, let me just go on to say that what's even more common apparent when we take antibiotics, that tends to obviously wipe out our good gut flora. So what some doctors are now doing are prescribing a probiotic with the antibiotic to enable our gut flora to be replenished. So it's becoming more, even say, a conventional practice to prescribe a probiotic with an antibiotic. So there is the development in terms of how the gut is connected with our way we think and feel.
Okay, next question. I know someone who takes a long time to eat their food. They advise this is because they take time to chew. Question, how much difference does chewing really make to one's health?
Okay, that is a good question, and it's important fact as well, that when we take time to chew our food, so breaking down our food starts in the mouth, because we've got what we call the amylase. And that's an enzyme that starts the process of breaking down our food in our mouth. Now, so when we do that, we're doing so to breaking down into the smallest molecules as possible within the mouth. So chewing helps with the process of digestion. So we should really chew as long as possible. Now, when it gets down into the gut itself, there's some other enzymes as well that's released from the pancreas that breaks down the food even further. So the process of digestion starts with good chewing of our food, and then that continues as we get the specific enzymes to break it down even further. So that's why chewing is benefit. Chewing purposefully is best, and as the start of our digestive process.
Okay. What can be done to manage or improve irritable bowel syndrome? Is wheat a problem for IBS sufferers?
Okay. Now, that is becoming more apparent, and irritable bowel syndrome as well can be linked with stress. So there's irritable bowel syndrome and irritable bowel disease, and sometimes we get confused between the two. And irritable bowel syndrome is a diagnosis of what we call exclusion. So we've excluded everything else. So, and usually the symptoms are with irritable bowel syndromes are usually constipation and diarrhea at sort of random times, and stomach pain as well. Usually if that goes on to 3 to 6 months and we've excluded everything else, so we excluded that there's no blood in the stools, there's no mucus, then we can be diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome. Now, the treatment for that, again, we have specific conventional treatments, but in terms of the sort of 8 laws of health, again, would be to institute good nutrition and also having some sort, because it has been linked to some psychological cause as well. So if someone can speak to someone, if they're having issues emotionally, that can tend to help as well. Because sometimes we could be stressed and not realize it, and it has an impact on our gut, and we have the symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome. So having a good chat with someone about it, if there's an emotional issue, would be quite effective as well.
Okay. Degeneration of the bones happens in all people.
Sorry,
Degeneration?
Okay.
Degeneration of the bones happens in all people. Mm-hmm. Why does bone degeneration cause more pain in some people than in others? For example, back and neck pain.
Okay. One thing, if someone is suffering with back and neck pain, it's important because especially as we get older, that tends to happen. And there's several reasons or several factors for that. But it's important when a person comes to me suffering with joint or joint pain is to do a vitamin D levels. Now, one thing that has occurred over the last 18 months, we are a nation anyway of low vitamin D, but it's become worse or made worse over the last 18 months. And so I routinely take vitamin D level of patients that are complaining of joint pain, especially neck pain. So one of the key things, again, as we get older, now, most issues of degenerative diseases start to take place or start to become an issue from the ages of 30 onwards. And the reason why that is that most of our foods are cooked. So when we cook our meals, that's obviously making the meals devitalize of its nutrients. And because of that, and our bodies are getting older, as we age, and we're not having the right nutrients as we should do, we then have kind of problems. So one person could have issues with their joints, another person may have developed blood pressure, another person may develop diabetes. But the key thing there is to make sure, again, through the 8 laws of health, is to have good nutrition with what we call whole food supplements. So an aspect of joint pain could be low vitamin D. And just as well, just a few days ago, I was speaking to someone who had joint pain, she had back pain, and I said, well, let's look at your vitamin D levels. And when she came back to me, I was speaking to her yesterday, her vitamin D levels was below. So we've got 2 levels. We've got what we call 50 and 25 or 30. So 50, anything above 50 is normal. Anything between 50 and 25, we call that insufficiency. When it's below 25, we call it deficiency. And she came back as deficient, so she was well below the bottom of normal. And she was suffering with pain as well. So with joint pain, back pain. So it's important, if you're suffering from joint, back pain, whatever kind of pain, is to check with your GP and ask for a blood test to see what your vitamin D levels are. One thing I would say is calcium, and I'm probably going to be shocked for this, but of course it's a standard supplement that a lot of us like to take. It's unnecessary. Supplementation with calcium is unnecessary. And what you're going to be doing is that when you take in more calcium than you need, is that you can develop constipation and your mood can change as well, and it has a sort of negative impact on our health. When we take vitamin D, from the calciums that we do eat in our food, vitamin D can help absorb that as well. And we're also finding out that vitamin D has a multitude of other aspects in how it works in our body.
Okay, this question is in relation to asthma. Apart from usual medications, what can be done naturally to manage asthma?
Okay, now, it all would depend, I would say, in terms of the frequency and what triggers, again. So we need to look at what's triggering the asthma. And when you find out what the cause is obviously then removing that cause. Because asthma is always usually can be stress-induced, can be cold-induced, and also can be what we call if you've got a problem, an allergy, allergy-induced as well. So the key thing to do is to make sure that you obviously identify the cause of what's triggering the asthma and then removing that specific trigger. Now, there are, again, things we can do to help ourselves once we identify the cause. And once again, is bringing the 8 laws of health would help in that. There are things that helps in terms of the lining of our airways in terms of reducing inflammation. So if you have anything that's anti-inflammatory, that would tend to help as well, because obviously asthma is a form of inflammation. So what's triggering that inflammation, and then using products that will reduce inflammation. So things that reduces inflammation are ginger, aloe vera. Aloe vera is another good source of reducing inflammation as well. So sources are turmeric, reduces inflammation as well. Sometimes if you've got a bad or chesty cold, it's said that if you use onion and put that on the chest, that draws out sort of impurities as well, if you've got an infection there with the asthma as well. But I would say be cautious in sort of, when we've got asthma, and we need to be sort of seen by a medical professional to make sure that we are sort of getting on top of it rather than it getting on top of us, okay? But we can use these sort of lifestyle measures as well to help with the inflammation. I hope that answers the question.
Okay. What causes a reduction in white blood cells?
Right. Now, just being ethnic origin does. Okay, right. So just being of sort of Afro-Caribbean origin, that could be. And then also it could be, depending of why they're asking the question as well, is that you can have blood disorders. There's a few blood disorders that can cause it as well. So it's what the purpose of the nature of the question is, really. So the doctor would usually will tell the depending on the person sitting in front of them why a reduction of the white cells are apparent, okay? Because there are different things going on nowadays that can cause white cell reduction, white blood cell reduction. So when you say white blood cell reductions, we have neutrophils and we have lymphocytes. Neutrophils usually is increased with bacterial infection. Lymphocytes are usually increased with viral infections. So if you've got low neutrophils, and depending on how low that is, so that depends on what type of white blood cells that person is asking about. If depending on how low it is, then that would need to be looked into, and why is it low as well. But sometimes, so if I can remember, a normal neutrophil is about 2.5 and above. So if you've got low, say 2, as what we said at Afro-Caribbean, we don't not to worry about that too much. But if it goes even much lower than that, then we say, well, okay, what could be going on? So it depends on the type of white blood cell. Is it neutrophil? Is it a lymphocyte? You've got other white cells as well. What is causing that, really? So what is the issue? So it's a good thing to, if that is the case, obviously if they know, then the doctor must have told them, so they must obviously have a conversation with their doctor to find out what's causing it. If the doctor hasn't done anything, and they're told that they've got low white cells, it's usually because they're of ethnic origin.
Okay. Can disc bulges in the spine be corrected so they don't impinge on the nerves?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, right. Yes, I have to be honest in this question because I've seen it myself, okay? I went over to Italy in 2016, and I spent a weekend with a professor. And it was a very fruitful weekend, and what I saw amazed me. But unfortunately, he was using a therapy that's not, was not kind of recognized in the UK. Other parts of Europe, it is. So Germany, they use it. Spain, they use it. And but there's other Europes, they don't recognize it as well. But it works. So there is. So if that person wants to send me a message in terms of if they want to ongoing as to what is the best way, then I would speak to them in terms of, pointing them to that specific clinic if they wanted to make contact. Yeah.
Okay, next question. How can visceral fat be reduced effectively in one who is limited in mobility?
Okay. So visceral fat obviously is the front, and that can obviously build up. That usually builds up because of lack of exercise, and we're eating more than we should, okay? So if we've got mobility, the best way to get rid of it is actually walking. The reason for that is that for some reason, if we exert ourselves for an exercise with visceral fat, it's not going to break down that type of fat. But walking is what we call an aerobic form of exercise, which initiates the breakdown of visceral fat. So if someone's sitting down, it's trying to do something that's not going to give them an exertion. So if they get a ball, maybe, and they squeeze the ball, or they can do their arms around for a few minutes, stop, or say half a minute, stop, and do that sort of sets of 5 times, that could be helpful as well. Because there's some form of exertion, but they're not going to exert themselves where they're panting. So as long as you're doing something that you're not exerting yourself in terms of panting and gasping for breath, you are then initiating lipolysis.
Okay, next question. I have recently been diagnosed with tinnitus. Can this problem be reversed?
Yes, and tinnitus.
Tinnitus.
Okay, right. I have advised patients with tinnitus and then with a natural product, and it depends what's causing it as well. So sometimes it's difficult to answer questions like this if someone's suffering with it. If it's got one side, it's new onset. If they haven't had an infection, then it's good to make sure they go and see the doctor, because there's certain things that can cause tinnitus that they need to exclude. Okay, so that's important. I would say that I'm not really sort of into herbs, but there are times when I do prescribe. And one of the herbs that's said to be helpful with tinnitus is ginkgo biloba. Okay. Now, and I have advised a couple of people to. Now, what I should have done is followed it up to find out how they got on. So, but I do know that is a form of natural therapy, is ginkgo biloba. Yeah.
Okay. This person's suffering from rheumatoid arthritis, and they ask the question, I have changed to a plant-based diet and stopped medication for the rheumatoid arthritis. Significant change, but unfortunately, the symptoms came back after 8 months. Any suggestions?
Yeah, sure. All right. Good. I like that kind of question. Now, I read in Back to Eden, where, can you give me about 2 minutes to answer this question? 3 minutes? Okay? Because this is an important question. Okay? Back to Eden, I read where Jethro Kloss went on an outing, and he noticed someone who didn't have any food with them. So he approached this person and said to them, do you care to join us and have a meal with us? The person said to him, no, it's okay, it's my day of fasting. So he said, why is that? So he said, well, I suffer with rheumatoid arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis is where your body's own defense system recognizes your joints as foreign and attacks your joints. So it's usually what it calls on both sides, okay, bilateral. So you can have joint pains in your fingers, knees. So he said that someone came to him and said to him, do not, or fast for 2 days of the week and you'll be fine. So he said, since that advice came to him, he's been doing that and he's been fine. So Jethro Kloss said to him, have you seen this person since? And he said, no. Now, scientifically, of recent times, in 2016, we've discovered why that works, okay? For some reason, it's not made frontline news, and I'm not sure why. But the Professor Hosni, I'm probably not pronouncing the proper name, he won the Nobel Prize in medicine for discovering what we call autophagy. So now what that is that, and that confirms why this person that Jethro Kloss approached was finding that the rheumatoid arthritis was not manifested once he instituted the 2 days of the week fasting. So what this professor found out is that after 12 hours of fasting, our body start to use its own glucose stores. So we have stores in the liver, and once it's used up, our body then uses what we call our fat cells and becomes ketones. So after 16 hours, he discovered that our body then says, there's an issue here, and then starts to self-correct. So we have self-correcting mechanisms in our body that then looks around for what the problems are. So that discovery, scientific discovery, confirms why this rheumatoid rheumatoid person that Jeff Klaus approached was finding that he was not having a flare of his rheumatoid arthritis with his 2 days of fasting within the week. So that could be something that that person can start to, but I would say start slowly, because there are sort of different types of what we call intermittent fasting. So there's a 16-8 that the person can institute, then maybe 1 day, and then step up again if they want to 2 days, and then see how she responds with that regime. Is that okay? I'm sure, hopefully that was okay, answer. Okay.
Okay, next question. My younger sister has vitiligo. What are the natural remedies to stop the condition from progressing and reverse the effect of the depigmentation?
Okay, so now I've come across a couple of patients with vitiligo as well, and what we do is sort of send the patient to the dermatologist. But one of the treatments we do initiate initially, and again, I don't know how effective this is steroids. So steroids is anti-inflammatory, and topical steroids. Steroids is anti-inflammatory. So in terms of the strength of the steroid, and how long the steroid, and how effective that is, I'm not sure. So in terms of what would be natural means, would be, again, if the steroid topically works, then I'll go for a natural anti-inflammatory. But I'm not saying that this will work, but a natural topical anti-inflammatory would be aloe vera, which is quite effective as a natural anti-inflammatory. So that's something that a person can consider. But again, I would definitely make sure that person sees the GP and gets a dermatology review as well with that condition.
Okay, next question. What are the lifestyle remedy for recurrent urinary tract infections?
Right, okay, so the simple one is just make sure you drink enough fluids. Okay, all right. Now, there's water as well. What sometimes you can do is if you put some lemon in water, that can help as a cleansing agent as well. So that can help. There are other herbs, but as I said, I'll try to stay clear from that, and just make sure, because there are different causes as well, and it's a person trying to identify what's initiating or causing the UTI. And I suspect that could be cystitis, inflammation of the bladder, I suspect, rather than the upper UTI. So again, it's a lot of water, fluid, and just put some lemon in there as well. Now, a natural antibiotic, natural viral agent, natural antifungal is garlic. So if they want to take 1 capsule daily, that could be helpful as well as a natural type of therapy. And again, sometimes some people are not tolerant to garlic, so it's making sure that they're tolerant to the garlic as well.
Okay, next question. What may cause body pains some of us suffer from after arising from night sleep? What might be possible reasons for these after-sleep pains, which often dissipate during the... Oh, let me start again.
So what type of pain? Just come back in.
Let me start the question again. I put my teeth in this time. Okay. What may cause body pains some of us suffer from after arising from night sleep is the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, what might be possible reasons for these after-sleep pains, which often dissipate during the course of the day?
Okay, right. So one of the key things that come to my mind straight away, depending on what the age of the patient is as well, is that possibly could be an autoimmune disorder, okay? So, as I said, if the patient's quite young, you could be looking at what we call ankylosing spondylitis, where you get this sort of stiffness, depending on what age they are. If they're a bit older, it could be the start of rheumatism as well, because you get that stiffness in the morning. And then we ask as well, how long is that stiffness go on for? So if it's going on for an hour, then it could be a possible autoimmune, start of autoimmune disorder. And usually, as the day progresses, that is a sign that they tend to start to feel better. So it's important, again, that they have some blood tests done to tease out what could be the real issue there. Also, it's important that what type of a job they do, what work they do. It could be that they're doing a lot of lifting, blah, blah, blah. And obviously the body, if you're not exercising, if you're not stretching the body, so it could be something simple. So it could be something simple, depending on what the person does, to a specific possible disorder. So it's good to stretch. So it's important that we stretch daily, especially as we get older, so we keep our muscles nimble, so we don't feel stiff in the morning. So as we get older and we get out of bed, especially from a previous day's work, we can feel stiff. So depending, as I said, the patient's age, and even what age you are, is to always have a good stretching regime. Because I was into sports, I was always stretching anyway. And even now, I still think I can put my palms to the ground on standing, okay? So just because it's something I'm kind of used to doing. I haven't done it for a few weeks, or maybe for a few months, but I know if I tried now, I possibly could do it. But it's good to be flexible so we avoid strains and pains as well through our daily activities.
Okay. What natural food is good for osteoporosis?
Okay, so a key thing there, and I think we mentioned it earlier on, is the vitamin D, and really sort of a good balanced diet as well. So you want foods, I would say definitely have sort of, lemon is a wonderful fruit, and it has so many benefits to it. And what you'll find when someone's suffering with things like osteoporosis, making sure they get a good vitamin D level. And you may ask, well, what is a good vitamin D level? And it depends on the person as well. So I would say a minimum of 2,000 units daily from a good quality source as well. And obviously a good balanced diet. Now with osteoporosis, obviously the content of your bones and so more fragile and can be more easily at risk of fractures. So there are things that we eat that can bring that on as well. So it's important to make sure certain aspects of our diet isn't there. Right, so the dairy products, someone may argue with me in this, because with the dairy products, you do have, especially with eggs, you have vitamin D. Sugar as well. The key thing with sugar is that it really reduces our nutritional intake. So we may be taking in a lot of good food, and then we go and have a donut, or we have something sweet, and we're undoing the things that we've done. So we need to sort of think about sort of habits that we have, which can bring about a negative effect on the good things that we're doing. So avoid things like chocolate. That's a big problem. And avoid sweets, okay? So keep sugar away from the diet, and that will help to obviously keep your nutrition up from the good foods that you're eating. So that's probably maybe a reasonable advice for that person.
Okay, what natural treatment can be used to improve blood circulation in the lower leg?
Okay, so again, it depending on what's causing the blood circulation, the poor circulation. So then I would need to sort of tease out, well, what's the issue and how old the person is as well. But one of the key things there, I would say, is to go for a walk. Walking would be a useful exercise to do, because obviously you're circulating all the blood, because the blood obviously has to circulate right around your body when you're walking. So that would be one of the most effective exercises. Another thing as well is if you put your foot in warm water in a bowl, that can be helpful as well, with some sort of Himalayan salts. You've got the natural salts in there that may help as well with the circulation. But the key thing is also what's causing it. Are there any sort of other health issues that's causing the poor circulation? But walking, I would say, would be one of the best solutions for that. And sort of from time to time, having a warm soak, foot soak as well. Okay, so I think that may be the extent of the questions. Is that it?
No, I've got another question for you, Doctor.
Okay.
Okay, this question. What natural foods or supplements can be used to reverse diabetes?
Okay. Right, someone asked me that I was doing a presentation last week, and the good thing is that when I started to speak about this, the person in the audience actually qualified what I was saying, because the person suffered with diabetes. So I said that the best thing for diabetes and to help to reverse it is a plant-based diet and actually walking, exercise. Those are the two key things I would say would really sort of help to reverse it. So when I said that, the person piped up and said, "Doctor, you're right. I was diagnosed with diabetes." He said when, and the doctor told him, "Make sure you start changing your lifestyle." So he said to us, myself and the congregation, that he started going for long walks. When he went back to check his levels, it had normalized. So it had normalized through change of his diet and walking continually. So walking is the best form. Now, what I generally say, I usually have a regime I take daily. So if you think about it, I could see these questions, they're quite, in terms of answering, sort of given a short time, but there are reasons why I would recommend a certain supplement, a whole food supplement regime. Whole food, that's different to getting a vitamin pill, say from the high street shop, which is synthetic and doesn't do any good to our bodies. So there's a difference between whole food supplementation and synthetic vitamins. And there's a reasons why I would generally advise on whole food supplements, especially with a diabetic as well. Because as I said before, a lot of our issues come about because of a lack of nutrients or lack of certain types of nutrients in our body. So let me answer that question in a certain way. Someone asked me if I can help their mum out, who's an elderly person, and they said if I can give them some vitamin, IV vitamin. So it's quite a high dose. So I gave this person it's not a high dose vitamin IV. And she said, the daughter, she was amazed the way her mum responded. And she was really sort of feeling low, fragile, loss of energy. The way she responded through just as a one IV of a high dose vitamin, of vitamin C. And she said she was alert, she was with it, she was talking, and that was just the one dose of IV vitamin C. So what I'm trying to say here is that how low we can be nutritionally in certain aspects of our intake. So it's important to have a good spread, and where we get that spread from as well is important, of nutrients, that is. Yeah.
Okay, next question. Does autophagy work for other autoimmune conditions such as multiple sclerosis?
Yes, because if you think about it, that your body is saying there's a problem, okay? So your body is starting to self-correct. So if it's initiated correctly with a health professional, then you should start to see some benefits from that specific practice. So I think it would be a good thing to seek to initiate, as well as obviously there are things that you need to be doing during those fasting periods in terms of what type of intake you should be having during those fasting periods. But it would be of some benefit as well, autophagy. Okay.
Okay, next question. What treatment do you recommend for burning sensation of the foot?
Burning sensation of the foot? Right. So Now, what I would say to the person is, when we talk about burning sensation of the foot, we have to rule out diabetes. So I don't know how old that person is and how often or how frequent that actually occurs. So I would definitely recommend that person checks themselves out to see if they are diabetic or not. So that's one of the sort of key advice I would give to that specific individual. So we need to rule out diabetes if there's burning sensation of the foot.
Okay, next question. What causes high uric acid?
Okay, right. So when we get high uric acid, so that person's obviously suffering possibly, I'm making an assumption here, from gout. Okay, so with gout you get a high uric acid, and that's usually from certain types of food as well. So we can get that from certain seafoods, can cause high uric acid. A high level of meat intake as well can cause a high levels of uric acid. So usually when you find that you counsel a patient in terms of changing their diets when they have a high uric acid, that comes down quite quickly. So we generally, when a person comes in with a gout symptom, we usually wait until the symptom in terms of pain has dissipated, and we'll take the level of uric acid. And usually if it's quite high, then we can sort of give counsel in terms of the type of diets or change of diet to help with reducing the uric acid intake. So alcohol as well can precipitate gout. So it's the food sources. So foods that have high uric acid content can cause gout.
And the final question, Doctor. Apart from surgery, what natural remedies can be used to prevent, stop the growth, and remove cataracts?
Okay. Right. I came across this the other day. Now, what someone said, I'm just speaking from this person's own experience, okay? And this person was in front of quite a big audience. And he said that he was suffering from diabetes, he was suffering from high blood pressure, he was suffering from early cataracts, and he said he was in and out of his family practices in America. And he was beside himself, he was overweight. Then he discovered through a specific body of people that if he changed his lifestyle, changed his diet, so he went on a plant-based diet, he started exercising, he actually instituted the 8 laws of health. He said his eyesight came back, he said his diabetes were reversed, his high blood pressure was normalized. He said that everything just went. So in terms of answering that question, if we reduce the intake of things that can precipitate these types of issues and institute the 8 laws of health, that can possibly help in terms of reversing the cataract. I'm not saying it will definitely will, but if they are willing to, through examples, especially that example I just gave, there's a possibility that it can be of some benefit. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And thank you as well. Thanks for listening.
Well, we want to thank you for tuning in to our final episode, and we want to thank you, Dr. Wesley Warren, for stepping in and answering our questions. I want to apologise, please, to all of those of you who have asked questions that have not been answered. We have quite a few, but we have already gone over 15 minutes. And so we are stopping here. Perhaps we'll answer your question next time. We thank you for supporting the program. We thank all of our health professionals who have supported us, Dr. Chidi, Dr. Lauren Wright, and Dr. Warren. We thank you all for supporting the health and lifestyle team here in Croydon. Have a blessed Saturday night, and we're just going to close with a prayer now. Father in heaven, we're so grateful that you have given us this opportunity to share the information that we have about how to live a healthier lifestyle. We know that you want nothing more than to have your people healthy. And so we thank you that you've given us the information, and we thank you that you've given us the opportunity and the means to share the information. Thank you for all of our health professionals who have supported the health and lifestyle team here in Croydon through this 4-week series. We pray that all of the advice that has been given will be helpful to somebody along their journey. Thank you for continuing to bless us. In the precious name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Thank you for watching. If this has blessed you, please don't forget to like it and share it with others. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to this channel. We broadcast every Saturday morning and afternoon. Don't forget to follow this ministry on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, as well as our website, www.croydonadventist.org.